I haven't seen you in 2 years since the amazing Stanford Health Summit in 2023, which is amazing. Had a phenomenal time. And this is like the first time we're seeing each other in person since then. So how's life been? What's happened in the last, couple of years since I've seen you? And just looking forward to hearing more about that.
Thank you. So as you know, I have started a venture fund since then, and we have been investing in deep tech health. We've made 60 investments so far across precision medicine, early detection, all that. As you also know, I also had my own personal diagnosis, which sucked twice. So I was diagnosed with early stage breast cancer via full body MRI, and then with thyroid cancer, and I had both of them removed. So I had a big year. And then I've also been wrapping up my postdoctoral work and trying to get it tied up with a bow.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a very eventful last, year and a half.
Yeah.
How are you feeling, first of all? Everything's removed. Assume in great health now, still monitoring everything. You're good to go at this point in time?
Yeah, I am. I feel better like a month ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it was a journey, especially getting an organ removed. And then that organ makes several hormones, 3 specifically, and then they replace one of them. And then they expect you to convert T4, which is your main storage form of thyroid hormone, to T3. And so not everyone does that the same. And that conversion is influenced by inflammation, genetics, nutrient status, all these different things. And so figuring out the balance of the medication that I needed was definitely rough.
Yeah, absolutely. From a technical standpoint, it seems like innovations in technology likely aided in this early detection and are aiding the support of your treatment and, calibrating medications, things like that moving forward. Can you talk to me a little bit about, I guess, the tech that was used and whether or not there are anything, whether or not there are any unique technological characteristics of any of the tests or the scans or anything that were used to identify your diagnoses?
Yes. So I was lucky enough to get a full body MRI that I got thanks to being a speaker at Next Med Health, which I just came back again from that conference. So very full circle. But yeah, that is really what allowed me to detect my lesions probably a decade ahead of standard clinical detection, because when I initially went into the clinic and I complained that I had a lump in my breast right here, the standard of care that I received, which is not necessarily what everyone's getting, but what I got at Stanford, is that the doctor felt the lump with her fingers and then she said, "That feels normal." Which I was like, okay, are you sure you can feel it?
Yeah.
With your fingers. And then she said that I didn't need imaging. So I did end up getting imaging because she said we could do it if I wanted to, given my family history, where my grandmother had 5 different kinds of cancer. But in general, now we have studies showing that, for example, AI is better than a doctor alone or a doctor plus AI when it comes to, for example, detecting cancer on a mammogram. So that's important, as we think about what tools we're using going forward. But anyway, so in my case, I got a mammogram and I got an ultrasound, and both of those came back as normal. So I believed that, and I thought, medical imaging was more factual than I now realize it to be. And so, when I got the full body MRI, I wasn't shocked because I had actually felt both of them for 9 years, especially the thyroid one, but I was not necessarily expecting it. I wasn't getting the MRI in order to get my breast checked. I was getting the MRI in order to get a healthy baseline so that I could have that data to compare against more data going forward, because the way I see it is that we're going to be the first generation that doesn't have healthy baseline data from when we're born, which seems like a big deficit as AI is coming in. So that's why we're the watch, although it also gives me day-to-day insights. And that's why I want to do early detection and monitoring. And so, the technology that was used wasn't that special. It was full body MRI, although we have since invested in a full body MRI company that is making more special technology, as are other people. But what was really special about it is this idea of measuring healthy people longitudinally over time and to look for early detection, because obviously a doctor can't feel something with their fingers if it's very, very small.
Right.
And they also can't see it with their eyes on a mammogram, on an ultrasound, on an image if it's very, very small. So in my case, my lesion was just 0.5 centimeters. And so that got missed. And when it comes to something like breast cancer, it's so important to catch it early because stage 4 breast cancer is not curable. So if you can catch it at stage 1, it means a totally different patient journey. It can be pretty simple and easy versus very stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's powerful. And thank you for sharing that. It's really interesting because, like you said, you think you can trust the imaging, you think you can trust the doctor, but it's like, no, it's actually probably in the best interest of your health to have a healthy skepticism of not only just the opinion of your physician, but also the imaging that's being used as well. In your persistence in wanting to improve your health, helped identify potentially life-threatening disease very, very early so that it could be removed and taken care of, and it doesn't have to affect you significantly over the long term, which is amazing. And I'm glad to see that, that happened and you're in amazing health.
Thank you. Yes. I mean, I did have what I had. So, but yeah, I am in an amazing health now. Obviously, it does have like a risk for recurrence and all that. So I think that's what makes it hard for people sometimes to want to detect things early. But you have the risk, obviously, whether you
exactly
have some things.
Exactly. And then the imaging, or not even just the imaging, but the technology we have now, is it probably even better now because you have had it identified that they can have a closer eye on you moving forward in terms of monitoring and potentially catching the, let's not, wish anything, but they could potentially catch any sort of recurring, presence very, very early as well. But now you have baseline data, you have a history of data that they can compare to, they can focus on. There's a greater attention to detail, I would hope, moving forward for you in the clinic. And I think that's great. And hopefully it never comes back. You don't have to even deal with that.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that hopefully it never comes back.
Yeah.
But with that data, it's like being in the position that I'm in now. I had that removed and I get to get the top best care in the world, getting standard screening, like very enhanced compared to what people get. So it's actually, like you're saying, kind of a bonus in some ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you catch it early. Like if you catch it too late where now it's ruined your life, that really sucks, obviously.
Absolutely.
Saying it didn't ruin my last 15 months, it was really shitty, but...
Absolutely. And I'm interested as well, like even while you're going through all of that, find a way to found a fund, a venture fund, investing in companies. And while going through everything you're going through personally, you're thriving professionally, starting a fund, doing your research, right?
No.
I'm
doing my best.
But I mean, honestly, considering, right? I mean, the best is all we can do, right? So I consider that thriving regardless, right? I'm interested to understand the process of creating the fund during this period of time, and the relationship between the two, right? How did the personal influence the professional, and how does the professional influence the personal? But would love to hear the story of Arben Ventures, its founding, and what really motivated you to go down that path.
Yeah, that sounds good. So Arben Ventures was founded by myself and by Ben Rolnick. And I'll just also say our founding investor was Dave McClure from Practical Venture Capital now, and his partner, Arben Ventures. I feel like I have to mention them because we literally just would not have a fund without the first person that believes in you, and that's so important. And that's what we try to be then for entrepreneurs. And then we also had Peter Gray, our first advisor and very early investor as well. So yeah, we wanted to start this in order to give capital to entrepreneurs earlier and to invest in scientists, to invest in creators, to invest in people who are mission driven. Many people that we've invested in have had personal experiences. So we've invested in people who had a personal experience either with like disability or cancer or tumor detection, something like that, with like a parent having cancer and then went and created a solution, or for example, Alzheimer's. So many people of whom we've invested in have had that personal connection. So yeah, we wanted to invest in people earlier, believe in people earlier. We love the model because we're in this top genetics lab at Stanford, where my advisor at Stanford, Mike Snyder, he's spun out 20 companies, 2 unicorns. And at one point, those unicorns were worth $6.5 billion.
Yeah.
And he's just generating more and more and more. So he's like a huge pioneer in personalized medicine. He was the chair of genetics for 15 years. There's 100 people in the lab who are just creating and then actually translating those insights into companies, which I think is really, really cool. But one of the things being in the lab is you just see all these projects that are amazing that die for lack of like $30K that could really take a creative idea that may or may not fit within a grant scope and like bring that to life. And so we were very frustrated and sad to see that. And that's kind of how Arben Ventures was born, was a desire to be that 30K.
Absolutely. So super early stage, almost first check-in, or, very close to first check-in, if I understand correctly. So floor is 30K. What's the range in terms of check size that you typically write for your early stage founders?
We do 25 to 50K first checks, and we've followed on up to 500K so far within our current portfolio. And then sometimes we'll do like a side vehicle as well for a higher number.
Okay.
But our primary model is around investing in many founders. So like I said, we've made 60 investments in the last 22 months, which is a lot. Mm-hmm. And it puts us within one of the most rapid or active allocators within deep tech health. And we like to just go very early. So we think it's within the fund's benefit as well as within the founder's benefit to go very early, because it allows us to believe in people faster. We're investing in the founder more so than a fully fledged, company. They mostly don't have product market fit, et cetera. So, yeah, that's the model.
Yeah. So what does it mean to believe in a founder for you in Arben Ventures?
Good question. I mean, honestly, I wish I could believe in more founders. So you can only, back and believe the founders that you do. I guess it's seeing something in them and seeing that drive and that passion and seeing that they've found the right product and the right market for their own vision and that they're 100% committed on that.
Okay, excellent. And I mean, uniquely, what characterizes a typical portfolio company founder for you all? Like, I know you mentioned they're scientists, but is it exclusive to scientists? Is there any other unique characteristic that these founders possess, or unique insight that you all have about investing in scientists at the early stage that informs your investing decisions? I'm super interested in just to understand your process of identifying, and just high quality founders and what you're looking for, if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. I think we're still learning. So all of those 60 bets, the way that we think about our portfolio is that we're taking hypotheses.
Okay.
I guess we're thinking about it like scientists. Yeah. And so sometimes when we don't know, is this the kind of bet that we want to be taking? Is it this? Especially with Fund 1, we've used it somewhat as an experiment where we weren't sure. Do we want to go a little bit later? Do we want to go a little bit earlier? Is this type of founder who's like very mission driven, but like not as salesy? Like, is that the one? Is it this one over here that's like just got really fast traction? Like, who are the winners? And so I think we've been able to experiment with that and more hone in on like who are our people. And the biggest realization that we've had is, again, just believing in people earlier, because from our standpoint, it's better because the valuation is just a lot lower if you believe in someone earlier before someone else does. And like at a time when others may not be believing in them. But we see that the product isn't that much different. Like, it's just like the same company, like 6 months later, and then they raise their valuation. So, or their cap, I guess most of them are raising on safes. So yeah, we really like to invest in scientists. We like to invest in like just like really excited entrepreneurs, mission-driven founders who are here to create impact and who are operating from that place.
Absolutely.
In science and in health. So it has to be pre-seed. Our new thing that we've now become more aligned to is that it has to be under $12 million valuation. And then we want to see that they're raising like not a huge round, which is aligned with, the low valuation. And then, mission driven, creating a huge impact in health. So not something that's incremental, or maybe it could like explode in sales, but it's not like impactful. That's a wonderful investment for someone else. It's just not our investment.
Yeah.
We want to invest in, for example, we invested in an early stage company that's doing at-home alcohol use disorder care, and standard rehab treatments have 13% efficacy rate or recovery rate.
Mm-hmm.
This at-home value-based care, North Star Care, that was founded by Amanda Wilson, who's a board-certified addiction medicine specialist, they have 94% recovery rates that last over a year. And so it's just like amazing, like value for people. So something like that is amazing.
Oftentimes, investors are not scientists themselves, who are making these types of investments, but you and Ben are. And so how does that affect the way that you develop relationships with your founders, the way you maintain relationships, the type of support you all can provide to them? I'm just really intrigued about that structure and dynamic between you and your portfolio companies.
I'd say there's 3 main things that being scientist investors gives us. So number 1, it allows us to understand that science is not fast. And it allows us to, again, from that, believe in people early, because we all kind of understand the nature of how fully formed it is or isn't. Number 2 is it allows us to access like really incredible diligence for companies, which can be very helpful for them, because often we've heard multiple times that if investors don't understand a company, they usually don't invest in it, which can be really hard for scientists or founders in science, regardless of if they're scientists where they have a really niche product and it could be really, really amazing. But if you're like the person who invented it and only you and like 10 other people in the world understand why it's so amazing, obviously that's an issue. And then but like luckily, because it's science, right? Like this is not B2B SaaS. So like if you have the number 1 only cure for prostate cancer, like that's going to have like more of a inherent value to it than if you have something that you're just like selling. And then my fund co-founder likes to say like, oh, like let's say you change the website from blue to green, it can make a lot of like difference in the sales. Versus in health, these are real products that can save people's lives, and so they have an inherent value to them. And coming from a scientific background helps us to assess that. And then the third thing is one thing that I get told all the time by companies is we'll ask questions about the science of what they're working on, and then they'll say, oh, no other investor has ever asked me that.
Hey.
Which I find to be really interesting, because I'm not even always going that deep when I say that.
That's very cool. That's very, very cool. And I expected something around that line, right? Just because, again, like you have the ability to do things that many other investors can't, and extremely advantageous for a founder, I would believe, to have an investor on the cap table who has a similar background, who understands things at a level that many others don't. Just a level of empathy that's there that probably wouldn't be otherwise. Yeah.
And like, I don't always understand what they're working on, right? I have to get educated by them we have 2 venture partners that do a really good job, like learning about it and going deep. And then we have our network of advisors as well. So I don't always understand what they're going into. But what I do understand is that they're the person that knows better than anyone else in the world. So like they're the good asset to go to, which I think sometimes gets overlooked by people who over diligence things at a very early stage, because again, these things aren't fully baked at a very early stage. So I think you could miss out on many of the best opportunities through over diligence.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's incredible.
So it's that balance between like both believing in them early, but then also getting curious about like, what is the science and why is it important?
Absolutely. Did you want to talk about just some of the insights from starting your venture fund specifically? I know we touched on it at different parts, specifically, but if you had anything particular you wanted to speak to about running your venture fund, just the insights from your first 60 investments, I guess kind of like core thematic things.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on portfolio construction. I think that's one of the most interesting things for us as we're building our fund, is thinking about how do we allocate our portfolio in a way that we can win and support founders. So again, we have a diverse portfolio construction approach, which we got from our advisor, Dave McClure, who's the founder of 500 Startups. And, basically what he taught us that just really resonated with me is that if we invest in, let's say we have $1 million to invest. So if we invest $1 million in one company at a $10 million valuation, we'll own 10% of that one company. And that company will then go on to succeed or fail. If we invest, let's say instead, can't think how I should say this. Like if we instead invest $10K in 10 companies at a $1 million
valuation,
so we're still investing
$100K at $1 million, right?
I know that's $100K.
Yeah.
Wait, I said $1 million and okay. So if we invest $100K then in 10 companies at a $1 million valuation, we'll still own 10%, but now we own 10% of 10 companies. So of those 10 companies, given that we're in this like fantastic ecosystem of health innovation where we believe we're at, some top percentile of this deal flow, let's say half or 3/4 or more make it to the $10 million valuation. Maybe there's a little dilution, but effectively now we own the same amount, but in multiple companies at a $10 million valuation. And then those companies can go and succeed and fail. And it just puts less pressure on them because let's say only one of them makes it to that, 9 of them can now fail. And so that actually aligns us also more with our companies where, we're not we're still bought in enough that it makes a big difference for us if any one of them succeeds. I would help any of those 60 companies however much they want. They can text me, they can call me, they can be help. I'm feeling sad today. My cat ate an ant and it was upsetting for me. I will literally be there for them. But, at the same time, I'm not going to have an incentive. It doesn't put me against them as an investor. I think at later stages, sometimes the investors can come up against the founders, whereas at very early stages, you're more aligned with the founders.
Absolutely, 100%. 60 investments later,
Yeah.
That's great. I know that we talked a little bit before about a particular idea that was of interest around personalized/precision medicine.
Yeah.
We'd love to learn more about that. What exactly is precision medicine and why is it something you're excited about?
Yeah. So there's personalized medicine, which is medicine that is measuring and focused on an individual. And then there's precision medicine, which just means you're actually treating the right problem instead of giving a treatment that maybe addresses the symptoms but doesn't get at the cause. So obviously, just in general, we want to move towards precision medicine where we have treatments that are addressing the actual problem that you're dealing with. And basically, if you look at personalized medicine, so medicine that's about an individual, and these two are very interlinked, right? Because if you are looking at the actual individual, you're going to get a lot closer to the right solution. But personalized medicine in general. So when I joined our lab at Stanford with Dr. Michael Snyder, he always gives the same example about personalized medicine. And I was like, okay, that's a nice example. And I'll give it to you in a second. But it took me 5 years of being in the lab to really understand why he was giving this example. So basically, the example is this. If you go to your doctor, they will take your temperature. And it's meant to be 98.6 typically. That's what they view as a normal, healthy human temperature. Well, it turns out that where did we get that number from? We got it from a study of German men in 1851.
Really?
I know, that's really shocking, right? That's shocking in of itself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then the second thing is that that number isn't correct. So more recent studies, including at Stanford, show that, the average is actually a bit lower than that. Not to mention you have your own personal average. So I might be my healthy baseline or my typical baseline, if it might be a better way to say it. It could be at 97.3. Maybe yours is at 98.
Yeah.
Right. And then the third thing is that we're doing that with every single number at the doctor.
Yeah.
Right? Which is just like mind blowing. Like, where did those numbers come from? They came from a world where we didn't really have computers. We didn't have big data. We didn't have data infrastructure. We couldn't store giant amounts of longitudinal data. Mm-hmm. And so we said, the best we can do here in a pre-computer, pre-AI kind of world is to just measure a bunch of people, take the average. We can only really use one number because we don't have enough capacity to do more. And then we'll just compare people to that average. And then we'll say okay, good enough. You're pretty close, which is good. And I think brought us a lot forward from probably wherever we were before we had that. But now that we have the capacity to take continuous measurements, to measure things on individuals, what we're learning is that all this data that doctors have said, oh, that's not useful, that's useless, it doesn't matter, as long as you're kind of in that range, it's all fine. What we're learning is that no, it's actually all extraordinarily important data, extraordinarily predictive data about your health. It's just that we didn't have the tools to utilize that data in the past. Mm-hmm. And so now that we've had major breakthroughs in, advanced imaging, advanced analytics of molecules in the blood, so we can measure millions of high quality data points that we truly just didn't have the capacity to measure even very recently. We have data infrastructure that we're basically just beginning to get, I would say. Mm-hmm. I have 2 different charts at Stanford, from Stanford Children's Hospital to Stanford Hospital. And then AI and advanced analytics, where we can actually make sense of all that data. So now, the more data that you have, the better. And all of that junk, meaningless data is actually the data that gives you the insights to save your life.
Yeah, that's extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And sounds incredible. That sounds amazing as an innovation. And I guess my thought in my head right now as I'm listening to you is how quickly can this become the standard? And what's stopping this from moving forward at an extremely accelerated pace right now to make this the standard of care for everybody moving forward?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
Something I think about a lot. I think one of the best ways I can answer that question is by sharing my personal story. So I think part of the problem is that what's possible in care is better than what's currently standard in care. So there's already quite a lot that's already possible in care, but isn't yet integrated into, clinical care systems for various good reasons, and various bad reasons, maybe. But, I was so lucky to kind of get the best of the best situation where I had a full body MRI. I detected this thing very early, to the point that Stanford said they weren't even able to send it away for sequencing because it was too small. I was able to get it sequenced by someone else, so that just goes to show it's too small. But yeah, so I had that early detection, and then I ended up having to actually advocate for myself and find out my own stuff many times. Even, for example, just after I got the early detection, there's kind of a culture of not liking full body MRI in medicine. So I wrote in, hey, I had this finding. And then they wrote back and they said, oh, no worries, you do not need a follow-up imaging. And I wrote back, yes, I do need a follow-up imaging. So luckily they said, okay. And I was able to come in and get that imaging. And then when I was there, So I had a mammogram and an ultrasound that were normal. And then when I went to have a clinical follow-up, the doctor said, okay, let's do a mammogram and an ultrasound. And I am very, very lucky that I Googled this for 5 minutes before the appointment, because I said in response, no, I think based on my Google search that I may need an MRI, given that this lesion is in the retroareolar region, and that can be missed by ultrasound. And as far as mammogram, I have dense breasts like 40% of women and most young women. And so that's not an adequate way to check, right? And I'd also just had a normal one 6 months prior. So I said that. And then I was lucky a third time that the attending that was with the resident who was seeing me happened to have been an oncologist. And she was like, oh, yeah, you're right. So then she did order me an MRI.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess just to say, like, there's all these steps where I ended up having to advocate for myself with information that I had just because I really cared about the outcome. And in the future, I guess it'll be AI doing that kind of advocating.
Again, like the human factor, right? Where the opinions of the physicians and the specialists were that these images were sufficient. You didn't need extra imaging. Everything that you were describing was relatively inconsequential, but your own advocating for yourself, your diligence, your positions got you the imaging and the test you needed to actually uncover the truth, right? And it makes me think about the fact that we can have all of this additional technology, right? I mean, AI capabilities are here today, and they're going to continue to get better, presumably. It's a lot of computational costs when you're thinking about precision medicine and all the data that would be required to process and store and all of that. If we're going to get to a point where perhaps we're continuously monitoring all of our key health information 24/7. But if, for example, the authorities, that being the physicians or the payers or whomever, who ultimately have the ability to say yes or no on a particular type of treatment or a particular type of test, they decide to disregard, or devalue or undermine, the technological recommendations. That's a very interesting structure to me, right? That we can ultimately end up in that place where perhaps we have to make a decision collectively as a society, or even just, as a system, a healthcare system, how much weight each group will be moving forward.
Right.
It's very interesting to think about.
Right. Like, what do AI do and what do doctors do?
Yeah, exactly. And who has the most power, right, in the situation? Which one has more weight? Whose opinion? Whose recommendation has more weight?
Right. Especially with the studies that show instances where AI beats doctors.
Exactly. But it's do the humans allow that to take place? Well, the physicians in their own, and I don't think it's malicious in any way, but it's in their own human experience and all of the knowledge and expertise and how they value their own knowledge and expertise. It's we get to a point where that's accepted on the human side of things, at least on the physician or within the clinic, when it comes to physicians. But I don't know. I was just thinking about that. Perhaps it's not a particular topic of discussion, but just something interesting as I was listening to you share that, because that's the number one thing that just kept popping up to me at every step was wow, okay, human miss, human miss.
Yeah.
And it was just interesting.
Well, I do want to just say that I've had the luck and I'm very grateful to have had access to the best care in the world. And I chose the best doctors in the world to be on my team. And, you got to choose a little bit more after you get that diagnosis than before. But, all my oncologists and my surgeons have been amazing. And they really care, and they're best in the world knowledgeable. I'm definitely more worried about people who have doctors that are average knowledgeable. But then again, that's what the standards, of care are for. And, in my case, I really want to go beyond the standard of care. I want to get the best care that's better than whatever is the standard, which is obviously not what they're used to. So, but yeah, my doctors have been absolutely amazing. I got a scarless surgery thanks to innovation. Really, really, really happy about that. So my doctors have been really amazing. It's just a lack of time for them to, dive in.
I see.
Like if my doctors had more time, like it's certainly not a lack of care. I think the other factor is that they're coming from this like average-based medicine system that's been in place for so long. And so within that system, different things make sense than within the future of medicine where we have health data and we are monitoring things and we're detecting things early. Like for example, I wanted to get ctDNA testing on my thyroid and breast tumor tissue and then like recurrence monitoring in the blood. And my doctor said no. My primary oncologist said no, but she's amazing. And, so eventually she said yes. And then I was talking with the doctors about this, like, why don't we do this for more people, given that, now Personalis, which was co-founded by my advisor, which is why I know about it, they have had within 78 patients for breast, they had basically, they tagged 100% of negative patients correctly, and they tagged 100% of positive patients correctly. So they were able to detect recurrence 15 months on average sooner than standard clinical detection.
Wow.
Yeah, it is amazing. And so there is some ctDNA testing that's currently used, but it's this other one called Natera. Personalis is 100x more sensitive. So I'm like, why aren't we using that one immediately, right?
Right, exactly.
Because like all it is it's a better tool. Like it's not changing anything else about the treatment plan. It's just like more accurate, right? Because the issue is that with Natera's test, Signatera, they only have a limit of detection down to 100 ppm. But the issue I'm trying to remember is 40 or 60%. Anyway, they miss about 40 to 60% of people, even when they have an active tumor, just because they have lower levels than that.
Okay.
But Personalis can detect ctDNA in 98% of people because they are just sensitive enough to like see if it's actually there or not there, versus Signatera, sometimes it is there, but they just can't measure that small of an amount.
It just makes sense. It does, yeah.
So I'm just like, okay, this is a better microscope. Like, let's just use the better tool. But what the doctors were explaining to me is that they don't want to get in a situation where they can see it on the ctDNA, but they can't see it on the imaging, because then that can be a very uncomfortable situation for the patient in the sense that there may be nothing that can be done, like clinically.
Yeah.
I personally think it still puts you in a greater position of power, but I can also understand why some people may not want it, especially, if you go in, yeah, I can understand. I could say a lot more about that.
Go ahead. Don't censor yourself. It's okay.
Okay. Let's see. Well, anyway, so I'm getting this ctDNA testing. And so then they do whole genome sequencing, they do whole exome sequencing, and they can do the ctDNA test for recurrence and also to see if your treatment fully cleared the disease as well. So I think it's very interesting. But, one of the challenges in the current system is that, for example, the first thing that my doctor said was, well, how would this change your course of treatment? Because patients can have a really tough experience if they learn something very concerning, but then they don't have a way to alter their course of treatment around that.
Yeah.
Again, that's just like not my view, but I do understand. I do understand that view.
Do you think that some of these better tools and some of this more granular data that we can collect with some of these advancements that we've made in diagnostics and monitoring and things like that, do you think that it has more research value than it does clinical value? Why is that?
Why not?
Well, that's just because I was just wondering, because that's what it kind of sounded like that perspective was about. It was like, hey, well, it's great to know this, and yes, it probably is interesting to have this data, but if it's not going to fundamentally shift the course of treatment, then why should we prioritize one over the other? And so when I thought about that, I said, okay, well, maybe from a research perspective, that is extremely interesting information and something that needs to be collected, because like you said, it's in these these new data sets, the fine details that we haven't had historical data to analyze, that we can now find, areas of improvement and really start refining treatments and get more precise about causes of particular, ailments or diseases or whatever the case may be. But when it comes to actual clinical treatment, what does the physician or the clinician do with that data? Is there a solution that maps to that data? And if not, then how should we think about that type of information relative to the current solution, which already has a well-established mapping to treatment?
Well, okay, just to be clear, the current solution for ctDNA detection is the exact same thing, but worse, but just like bad at measuring it.
I see.
So I would argue you probably just want the good measurement in that case.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, I think that's the question that doctors have about early detection. And it could be that some people don't want to know if there's not going to be something actionable. It could be that other people would like to know. For example, maybe I would choose to go to Hawaii or take a different approach to how I spend my time. Or maybe I would choose not to have so much wine, which is carcinogenic.
Sure.
Really drink that anyway, but someone might. And I think that having more information gives people more power.
Right. Okay. Patient empowerment. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's really hard to know ahead of having an answer like that, like how someone might react, what they might do. Maybe they'll lower their stress, which is related. But in addition, there's also lots of actionable things that can be done. Number one, you can do more monitoring, and you can choose what kind of monitoring and imaging you're going to be doing. One reason actually that was brought up by doctors that they don't want to do ctDNA testing is because that alone apparently doesn't necessarily qualify for insurance reimbursement of monitoring. So that can be stressful for patients. To me, again, I'm just like, I don't know, like it's better to know. But yeah, I mean, I guess the question is, like, would you want to know 15 months earlier, especially in a world where we're getting much better non-invasive treatments as well? So like as medicine improves and we're getting, cell therapies, we're getting non-invasive targeted treatments, we're getting cancer vaccines, as all this improves, we'll move towards a place where you don't need to see it on imaging and you can actually just treat it with what you have and what you detect prior to something being seen on imaging.
That was amazing.
I just think it's inevitable, right?
It's inevitable.
Yeah, because as we're getting better and better treatments, it'll be more like just getting a mole removed to get cancer. Like, I'm not saying no one's going to get it, but the earlier and earlier that you can detect it, the less and less invasive and harsh of treatments that you can do. And so it really does make life or death difference for many people.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even just over time collecting the information at an individual level, hopefully we get to a understanding around preventative steps at an individual level. And individual plans for people to have cancer mitigation, preventative strategies and treatments. Hopefully, I would imagine, just because, like you said, we'll have access to so much more data and the insights we can get from that. Who knows what's consequential tomorrow that we believe is relatively inconsequential today in terms of lifestyle choices, consumption, things of that.
So it's crazy.
Ariel, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. And I'm thrilled to see what you build with Arben Ventures and continue to build our relationship and see how you can help impact the world through your investments. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you.